Welcome to our channel. In the final moments of this captivating story, Zachary, who once left Amy and his unborn child for a high-stakes merger, suddenly appears at an opulent charity event. His desperate plea to meet his brilliant son Toby creates a wave of tense emotion, one that reveals the high price of sacrificing family for ambition. If you're curious about how Amy responds after all she's overcome, you won't want to miss a single detail of this roller coaster drama. Be sure to listen to the entire story to see how everything truly ends. And while you're here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay updated on more enthralling tales like this. We'd love to hear your personal opinions, so drop a comment below and let us know where you're tuning in from. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful, life-changing stories that keep you coming back for more. Zachary Warren stood in the grand kitchen of the penthouse he shared with Amy Lawson, staring blankly at a pregnancy test resting on the gleaming marble countertop. Overhead, lights reflected off the surface, making the two pink lines appear even more vivid. He swallowed hard as he loosened the designer tie around his neck, the tension in the air so thick it felt almost tangible. Across from him stood Amy, exhausted but hopeful, still wearing her pale blue medical scrubs from a grueling shift at the hospital. She had dashed home the moment she could to surprise him with what she assumed would be joyful, life-altering news. I'm pregnant, Amy managed, her usually confident voice trembling at the edges. She searched Zachary's face, hoping to see a smile or at least some flicker of excitement. Instead, his expression remained unreadable, his gaze sliding away to the floor. "Zach, we can figure this out together, right?" Her question hung in the tense silence. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Amy, I can't," he said in an oddly detached tone. "My company is expanding, and in less than a month, Warren Innovations will merge with Chen Industries. Most of our operations are moving to Singapore. I was going to break the news to you over dinner." Amy's eyebrows shot up. "Singapore? That's halfway around the world. But we can go together. We'll work it out. After all, this baby is ours." She was almost pleading, unable to accept the finality creeping into his voice. Zachary inhaled deeply, picking invisible lint off his perfectly ironed suit coat. "That's just it. I'm marrying Vanessa Chen. It's already arranged." "I'm sorry, Amy, but this is bigger than us. It's a business deal, part of the merger. I need to do what's right for the company." Shock rippled through Amy like an electric current. The words hit her harder than she ever thought possible. In a surreal instant, she realized the Zachary Warren she'd fallen in love with, the man who had once proposed to her under a canopy of stars, was gone. His eyes lacked warmth, reflecting only the cold glimmer of corporate ambition. She tried to force herself to speak, but all that emerged was a weak, disbelieving whisper. "Vanessa Chen, your investor's daughter? Since when? How?" He shook his head. "It's not what you think. It's just business, an arrangement. You'll be taken care of, I promise. The lawyers have already drafted paperwork. The penthouse is yours until you decide your next steps." Amy stepped closer, searching for any sign of the man who used to memorize her favorite songs and bring her midnight coffees during her long shifts. "Zach, look me in the eye and tell me everything we built, everything we dreamed about, meant nothing to you." For a moment, his face faltered, but whatever softness he might have felt was quickly replaced by a guarded, mechanical resolve. "I'm sorry," was all he could muster. Then he grabbed his briefcase and disappeared through the door, leaving Amy in stunned silence. She stood there for a minute, barely registering the persistent beep of the pregnancy test. She felt hollow, like someone had just carved out her heart. A swirl of phone notifications interrupted her shock. A text from Linda Mills, her best friend and fellow resident, plus a flood of business headlines heralding the upcoming Warren-Chen merger. Yet the pang that made her dash to the bathroom was more physical, a wave of nausea so strong she barely made it in time. Kneeling on the cool tiles, she pressed her palm over her stomach. Her breathing was ragged as the reality of her situation crashed over her. In a single night, she had lost the man she loved and watched the future they'd planned to go up in corporate smoke. Still, she heard the faint buzz of her pager from the hospital, calling her back for an emergency operation. With trembling hands, she splashed cold water on her face and steadied herself. "I'm Dr. Lawson," she muttered to her reflection, trying to hold on to a semblance of composure. "I can do this. I have to." She grabbed her keys and jogged to the elevator, already texting Linda that she was headed to the OR. Her mind spun, trying to reconcile what had just happened with the demands of her profession. As the elevator doors slid open in the lobby, she took one last shaky breath. Her personal world might be collapsing, but patients' lives depended on her. "One step at a time," she murmured, stepping into the cool morning air. The next morning, Amy stood outside an ATM near the hospital, swiping her card for the fourth unsuccessful time. "Access denied," the screen informed her. With labored calm, she tried once more, but the result was the same. Overnight, her entire financial lifeline had vanished. Her mind raced as she leaned her forehead against the cold metal, exhaustion mingling with creeping panic. Before she could gather her thoughts, Linda Mills arrived in a flurry of pastel scrubs and a determined expression, 2 paper cups of coffee balanced precariously in one hand. "Hey, you look like death warmed over," Linda said, thrusting a cup at Amy. Then, catching sight of the ATM screen, she added, "Wait, don't tell me." Amy sighed. "All my accounts are gone. I can't pay for anything. And I don't even think my keys to the penthouse still work." Term. She showed Linda a string of notifications on her phone. Closed accounts, canceled credit cards, removed signatory privileges. The magnitude of Zachary's calculated move sank in. "Good grief," Linda muttered, brows knitting. "This is unbelievable. You're a joint owner on most of those accounts. He can't just lock you out like that." "But he did," Amy replied bitterly, taking a cautious sip of the coffee before recoiling. Morning sickness had turned her stomach sour. Shaking away the discomfort, she forced herself to focus. I didn't even get to gather my personal things from the penthouse." Linda's deep brown eyes flashed with fierce protectiveness. "Come stay with me. I've got a spare room, and Jenny just moved out. You can't sleep on call at the hospital every night." Amy swallowed hard, tears pricking her eyelids, but she refused to break down in the middle of the busy lobby. "I'll pay you back. I promise," she whispered, already overwhelmed by her friend's generosity. Linda looped an arm through Amy's. "You know it's not about money. Let's get you a new bank account today and talk to someone who can help. My cousin Ben is a lawyer specializing in exactly this kind of mess. We'll figure out how to deal with your ex-fiancé." The word ex-fiancé felt like a physical punch. Despite everything, part of Amy still couldn't believe Zachary had so abruptly turned into a stranger. Only a few weeks ago, they had been excitedly discussing baby names, or so she thought. Now he was across the ocean, presumably planning a high-profile wedding with Vanessa Chen. Her phone buzzed again. A news alert popped up. Warren Innovations to merge with Chen Industries. Wedding of the year expected in Singapore. She stared at the picture of Zachary exiting a luxury car in Singapore. Vanessa's arm looped through his. Her bright lipstick matched the color of his tie, giving the image a sickening sense of coordination. She forced herself to close the article before heartbreak consumed her. "Come on," Linda said gently, steering Amy away from the unyielding ATM. "We'll take this step by step. First, let's open a new checking account. Then, we'll get you moved into my place. After that, maybe, just maybe, you can allow yourself to be excited about bringing new life into the world." A wave of renewed nausea hit Amy, but she nodded bravely. "You're right. My patient is the baby now, and the baby needs me to be stable." "You've got this." Linda gave her shoulder a supportive squeeze. "Just remember, you're an amazing doctor, one of the best in the residency. If you can mend broken arteries, you can definitely mend a broken heart." As the two doctors hurried through the hospital corridor, a passing nurse signaled to Amy. "Dr. Lawson, there's an emergency down in pediatrics. They paged you." Amy's grip on the coffee cup tightened. This was her life now, a world of surgeries, unstoppable responsibilities, and a baby growing inside her. Casting one last glance at the closed ATM, she let out a steadying breath. "I'm on my way," she told the nurse. Then to Linda, "After I save a life, I'll meet you at your place. Thank you." Linda watched Amy stride purposefully toward the pediatric wing, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. If Zachary Warren thought he could keep Amy Lawson down, he had no idea just how formidable she could become. especially when fighting for someone smaller and more vulnerable than herself. Time became a blur of long shifts, constant morning sickness, and seemingly endless legal paperwork. 3 months into her pregnancy, Amy found herself in Linda's living room, rifling through a thick stack of documents from Zachary's attorneys. Linda had a sprawling array of medical journals on the coffee table, but Amy's attention was drawn to a magazine cover featuring Zachary and Vanessa under the bold headline, "Singapore's Elite Power Couple." Amy swallowed against the knot in her throat. Despite her newfound determination, every fresh glimpse of Zachary reopening wounds she was trying so hard to stitch shut. Her gaze drifted to a separate set of papers that felt infinitely more hopeful. Her approval letter for a hospital-funded research project on minimally invasive pediatric surgical techniques. "Focus on that one," Linda urged, gently pulling the magazine from Amy's grasp. "Not on those two smiling on the cover. Look, the hospital believes in you so much that they're funding your project. That's huge, Amy." Amy nodded, attempting a small smile. "They told me I'll be leading my own research team. Never would have imagined that a few months ago." She glanced down at her belly, where a soft flutter reminded her of the life developing inside. "I'm going to do this for me and for the baby." Linda checked her phone. "Also, I got confirmation from Ben. He's reviewing those new documents. He says not to worry. Zachary might think he's unstoppable, but there are limits, even for a millionaire, especially one who left his pregnant fiancée for a business arrangement." Amy exhaled slowly, relief mingling with gratitude. "I owe you both so much, thank you." Linda placed a hand on Amy's shoulder. "Family isn't always about blood. You saved my niece's life when she had that complicated infection, and you were just a second-year resident then. I'm just returning the favor." Before Amy could say more, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Harriet Warren, Zachary's mother, who had been trying to reach her at least once a week since the breakup. Amy frowned, her finger hovering over the ignore button. She had no idea whose side Harriet might be on. "She keeps calling," Amy murmured, showing Linda the screen. "I haven't picked up because, well, I don't know what she wants." Linda shrugged. "Sometimes parents aren't aligned with their adult children's decisions. She might genuinely want to help, or she might just be doing damage control." "Hard to say." Amy declined the call. If it was that important, she'd leave me a message. Just then, a text came in from Harriet. "Please let me help you. This isn't the future I wanted for you or my grandchild." Her heart twisted. It was the first time anyone had referred to her baby as Harriet's grandchild. How could Harriet claim such a relationship when Zachary had severed all ties so coldly? The phone beeped again, a news alert about Warren Innovations' rising stock prices credited to the Singapore expansion. Amy felt a flicker of bitterness. "While he's out there finalizing the biggest merger of his life, I'm learning how to survive paycheck to paycheck." Linda's eyes gleamed with something almost mischievous. "He's not the only one who understands investments. The shares that Ben helped you acquire have grown too. If you keep funneling some money there, eventually you'll have leverage. Might take a couple of years, but it's possible." A firm knock on the door interrupted them. The courier arrived with another bulky envelope from Zachary's legal team. Rolling her eyes, Amy set it aside for Ben. She was learning quickly that responding immediately rarely did her any favors. "Let me guess," she said wryly. "More settlement agreements, more NDAs, more hush money checks." She refused them all, determined to handle the pregnancy on her own. If Zachary wanted a clean break, then she'd give him precisely that. No free passes. Linda took the envelope. "I'll get this to my cousin. Meanwhile, let's plan your baby shower. A small one, just with hospital staff." Amy attempted another smile, though tears threatened. "I never imagined celebrating like this. But you're right, life goes on." In the corner, a small bookshelf caught her eye. On it sat a single item from the penthouse, an ultrasound photo she'd retrieved on her last frantic visit to gather personal things. Her baby was already forming tiny fingers, a tiny heart. All the more reason, she reminded herself, to keep forging ahead. On a brisk morning nearly 6 months into her pregnancy, Amy entered the operating room for what she expected to be a routine pediatric appendectomy. Fate, however, had other plans. Midway through the procedure, she felt a sudden, intense pressure in her abdomen, followed by an overwhelming contraction. Her breathing hitched, but she forced herself to maintain focus on the child's open incision. Nurses exchanged worried looks. "Dr. Lawson, are you sure you're okay?" one of them asked, glancing nervously at the monitor tracking Amy's vitals. Her heart rate was skyrocketing. I'm fine," Amy gritted out, meticulously completing the final sutures. Her vision swam for a moment, but she steadied herself. "We need to close up properly, then I'll—" Another contraction rippled through her, stronger this time. Linda, who had rushed in upon hearing the commotion, quickly stepped forward and placed a supportive hand on Amy's elbow. "You're in active labor. Let me finish." Reluctantly, Amy nodded, stepping back with trembling hands still gloved. "All right, you close," she said, her voice tight with both pain and professional urgency. "I can guide from the sidelines." Within half an hour, the child was out of danger, whisked to recovery. Meanwhile, Amy found herself being wheeled down the corridor, breath coming in ragged gasps. She'd officially gone into labor at 39 weeks, technically right on time, but definitely not under ideal circumstances. Waves of anxious excitement and leftover adrenaline from the OR flooded her mind. In the labor and delivery suite, the hospital staff scrambled to accommodate this high-profile resident, who also happened to be one of their most respected pediatric surgeons. Monitors were attached and an IV line was started. Linda stayed by Amy's side, calmly coaching her through contractions. Despite the chaos, a small surge of pride lit Amy's heart when the nurse told her the child she operated on was stabilizing. Even in the throes of labor, she found solace in knowing she had saved a life. But as the contractions intensified, her thoughts drifted to the one person who wasn't there, Zachary. She tried not to let bitterness steal her focus, but it was nearly impossible. How could he forsake both mother and child? The pang of betrayal fueled her anger, which blended with the physical pain tearing through her body. Then came a rush of activity. Lights glared. Medical staff shouted instructions that Amy herself normally would have given. When she heard the urgent beep of fetal monitors, she tensed, but the obstetrician reassured her that everything looked normal. It was just time to push. Despite her professional composure, Amy felt tears slip free as the enormity of motherhood bore down on her. Several hours later, her son arrived with a healthy cry, a perfect, wailing manifestation of new life. The moment the nurses placed him into Amy's arms, all the tension coiled inside her unwound. She stared in awe at the tiny face peering back at her. Linda stood at her bedside, unable to hide her tears of joy. "He's beautiful," she whispered, reaching down to brush the baby's soft hair. "Thank you for everything," Amy managed, voice hoarse and laden with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Linda gently patted Amy's shoulder. "I'm honored to be here. Now what are you going to call him?" Amy looked at her son, thinking of the life they would forge together, just the two of them. "Toby," she whispered. "Toby Lawson." The baby whimpered, and Amy instinctively cradled him closer, cherishing the closeness of the tiny warm body. In that moment, she could almost pretend that Zachary was just a faint memory, a cautionary tale. As Toby blinked up at her, she felt something anchored deep in her soul, an unbreakable resolve to protect and provide for him at any cost. "Welcome to the world, Toby," she whispered, pressing a tender kiss to his forehead. "It's you and me, kid." Her phone, resting on a side table, buzzed with more notifications from Harriet. Another volley of calls and texts. Amy ignored them. Right now, only one person deserved her full attention, and that person was nestled in her arms, offering a fragile new beginning she intended to make the most of. 2 years passed in a whirlwind of sleepless nights, frantic childcare arrangements, and an ever-growing reputation for Dr. Amy Lawson as a powerhouse in pediatric surgery. Toby, bright-eyed and inquisitive, grew into a bundle of boundless energy. He spent his days tottering around Linda's apartment, curious about everything from stethoscopes to the shapes of puzzle pieces. On a Saturday afternoon, Amy found herself in the modest kitchen, preparing Toby's lunch while glancing at a stack of medical journals on the table. New accolades had started to trickle in for her pioneering surgical techniques, and she was scheduled to present her research at a prestigious conference soon. She still wore a slight limp from being on her feet too long the night before, but nothing dimmed her determination. Toby toddled in, clutching a large jigsaw puzzle piece shaped like a dinosaur's head. "Mommy done," he announced, proudly displaying his completed puzzle map of prehistoric creatures. He was unusually advanced for a toddler, something Amy suspected stemmed from both paternal and maternal intelligence. She plastered on a wide smile, scooping Toby into her arms. "You're getting so good at that," she cooed, ruffling his curls. Linda appeared, rummaging through the fridge for a bottle of water. He's a smart little guy. He recognizes letters, shapes, and even tries to pronounce the medical terms he hears. Setting the water aside, she opened a worn file folder. "By the way, we got new lab results back for your valve repair research. Preliminary results look amazing." Amy sighed in relief, balancing Toby on her hip. That's one more step toward a surgical revolution in pediatric cardio. She felt a surge of gratitude for everything that had aligned to bring her to this point. Her supportive colleagues, Linda's unwavering help, and Toby's simple but powerful presence. Just then, Linda's gaze darted to a small TV perched on the counter. Business news scrolled across the screen, announcing in bold letters, "Warren Innovations in Crisis. CEO Zachary Warren and wife Vanessa Chen rumored to be divorcing." Amy froze, Toby's weight suddenly feeling heavier. While she'd expected things might fall apart eventually, she hadn't realized it would be so public. Linda quickly muted the TV, but Amy's eyes were already drawn to a photograph of Zachary leaving a corporate building, looking haggard. His once immaculate hair was windswept, and lines of stress furrowed his brow. "Apparently that big merger wasn't everything he hoped it would be," Linda said, sounding more matter-of-fact than gossipy. "You okay?" Amy cleared her throat, tilting Toby so she wouldn't have to see the TV. "Yes, I'm fine," she lied. Truthfully, her heart pounded at the sight of his face, conjuring memories of that fateful day he walked away from her and Toby's future. But she was determined not to let it derail her. He made his decisions. Let him deal with the consequences. Toby squirmed, reaching for his dinosaur puzzle piece on the table. Amy set him down gently. As he ambled off, Linda touched Amy's arm. "It's just speculation, but there's talk of a shareholder revolt. You know, if you hadn't sold those shares..." "I sold enough to sustain us," Amy corrected softly. "I kept a sizable portion. Not enough to control anything, but maybe enough to matter someday." Linda studied her face. "Then we wait. Maybe that day will come." Amy nodded, though her attention was already back on Toby, who had trotted into the living room to line up puzzle pieces in perfect geometric patterns. She felt a pang of guilt, wondering if Toby would ever meet the father whose eyes he'd inherited. But that regret was tempered by a fierce conviction. Toby deserved better than what Zachary had once offered. Money without genuine love or involvement. A chirp from Amy's phone indicated an email, an invitation to be a keynote speaker at a major pediatric conference. She accepted without hesitation. This was her moment, to step out of Zachary Warren's shadow entirely. "Okay, Toby," she said, strolling into the living room. "It's you and me, kiddo. Let's show the world what we can do." 3 years into motherhood, Amy found her star rising. The national press dubbed her the next frontier in pediatric surgery, and invitations to speak at conferences around the globe poured in. Toby, now 3, had become a pint-sized genius, quietly astonishing everyone with his knack for memorizing scientific terms. One crisp evening, Amy and Toby arrived at the plush grand ballroom of Henderson Memorial Hospital, the site of an annual fundraising gala. People in glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos milled about, sipping champagne and chatting beneath crystal chandeliers. Amy had been invited as an honored guest, recognized for her surgical innovations. She wore a floor-length emerald gown that brought out the green flecks in her eyes, while Toby sported a mini tux that made him look both adorable and precociously serious. As they made their entrance, camera flashes momentarily disoriented Amy. Toby clung to her hand. She glanced around for Linda, who was supposed to meet them, only to freeze when she spotted a face she hadn't expected to see. Zachary Warren. He stood near the open bar, looking older but still undeniably recognizable in his sharp suit. Their eyes locked across the distance, and Amy felt her breath catch. She instinctively tightened her hold on Toby. Linda appeared by her side in seconds, noticing the line of Amy's gaze. "He's probably here because Warren Innovations donated heavily before the scandal," she whispered, carefully positioning herself so Toby wouldn't see Zachary. Ignore him if you can. See, easier said than done, Amy thought, her heart pounding erratically. Yet she refused to let this overshadow the real purpose of the evening. She guided Toby toward the stage, where hospital administrators readied a microphone for the award presentation. Since Toby had begun stringing sentences together, he had insisted on being part of his mother's big moments. Amy found the arrangement both sweet and symbolic. He was, after all, the reason she pushed so hard to excel. The MC introduced her, lauding her new technique for repairing delicate cardiac structures in infants. Applause rippled through the room. Amy stepped up to the microphone, Toby standing beside her in his perfectly pressed little tux. Cameras flashed, capturing the image of mother and son, each exuding a quiet confidence. 3 years ago, Amy began, her voice reverberating in the hushed ballroom, I discovered how resilient children's hearts truly are, both physically and symbolically. My hope is that this new procedure will save as many young lives as possible. But I also want to thank someone who has taught me more about courage than any medical textbook ever could. She glanced down at Toby, who gazed up at her with bright eyes. My son, Toby. At that, a gentle wave of admiration rolled through the audience. Toby, right on cue, carefully held up the crystal award presented to his mother. Congratulations, Mommy, he piped into the microphone, drawing a burst of charmed laughter from the crowd. From her peripheral vision, Amy caught a glimpse of Zachary, his face a portrait of shock. She felt a surge of triumph. This was the son he had never met, the brilliant child he had forfeited for corporate expedience. The applause thundered. Amy accepted the award, pressing a kiss to Toby's cheek. They stepped off the stage to a standing ovation. Linda leaned in, whispering, He just left. Amy, placing the award on the table, gently brushed Toby's hair. Zachary? Yes, Linda confirmed. I watched him walk right out after the first wave of applause. A swirl of conflicting emotions tightened in Amy's chest. Relief, sadness, vindication. Most of all, an overriding protectiveness toward Toby. As the hospital's executive director approached to congratulate them, Amy drew Toby close. She had no intention of letting Zachary's reappearance derail the path they'd forged, one built on unconditional love rather than fleeting corporate alliances. Amid the conversations and well wishes, Toby tugged on her gown. Mommy, can we see the fish tank again? A huge saltwater aquarium was the gala's centerpiece. Of course, sweetheart, Amy murmured, letting Toby lead her. She cast one last glance at the ballroom entrance, where she spotted Harriet Warren watching them from the corner. The older woman's face shone with tears and a gentle smile. Amy offered a tight nod, uncertain of Harriet's motivations but acknowledging her as Toby's grandmother. They continued onto the aquarium, Toby squealing with delight at the brightly colored fish. Life went on, and as Amy felt Toby's hand clutch hers, she knew she had already gained everything that truly mattered. Late that same night, Amy received a string of frantic messages from Harriet, who was being admitted to the hospital under an urgent oncology consultation. Linda alerted Amy first, handing her the lab results with a grave expression. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, Linda said quietly, sadness lacing her voice. Amy's stomach dropped. Despite her strained relationship with Harriet's son, she had no ill will toward Harriet herself. She'd been Toby's only link to that side of the family, sending him educational books and math games under the radar. Amy recalled how Harriet had once pleaded over the phone, "Please let me help you." Perhaps Harriet's brand of concern had been genuine all along. Now Harriet lay in a private hospital room, her once regal posture diminished by pain and exhaustion. When Amy stepped in, Toby in tow, Harriet's eyes lit up with recognition. "You came," she whispered, reaching for Amy's hand. "I'm your consulting doctor," Amy replied, careful to keep her tone professional. But the moment Toby toddled forward, Harriet's stern visage cracked into a watery smile. "There he is," she managed, patting the bed. Toby climbed up cautiously, wide-eyed, as Harriet lightly ruffled his curls. Harriet exhaled shakily, turning back to Amy. "I'm sorry for everything. I tried to warn Zachary, but he wouldn't listen. All he saw was the merger, the profit. I hoped he'd snap out of it before it was too late." Amy felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Harriet's eyes brimmed with sincerity. "I appreciate that," Amy replied simply. She didn't elaborate on the heartbreak or the struggles or the lonely nights. Instead, she nodded. Toby and I will be here. Let's focus on your treatment. But Harriet slowly shook her head. I'm afraid it's too late for that. The metastases are advanced, and chemo is only a stopgap at this point. She reached for a folder on the bedside table. I have instructions for transferring certain assets, including my shares in Warren Innovations. I want them to go to Toby. Amy stiffened. Does Zachary know? Not yet, Harriet answered. And I'd like to keep it that way, at least until the dust settles. The company is in free fall from the divorce scandal. Vanessa Chen is maneuvering to oust him completely. Toby's shares might become a significant factor. It's all in here. Linda entered the room then, offering Harriet some water and adjusting her IV drip. Toby, for his part, busied himself by showing Harriet a drawing he'd made of the hospital, complete with colorful hearts. Harriet's eyes shone with tears at the child's work, every inch of her face alight with a bittersweet mixture of pride and regret. After Linda ushered Toby out to the hall for a quick snack, Harriet turned back to Amy. I have one last request, she said, voice faltering. Let Toby visit me again. Let me be his grandmother. Even if I don't have long, I want him to remember I cared. Amy pressed her lips together, nodding. The older woman reached up to squeeze her hand with surprising strength. And whatever you do, Harriet added, don't underestimate the storm that's coming with Zachary's downfall. That night, after tucking Toby into bed, Amy pored over the legal documents Harriet had provided. They confirmed a direct transfer of Harriet's shares to Toby, making him a significant stakeholder in Warren Innovations. On top of that, Harriet had collected evidence pointing to potential corporate fraud during the original merger. Amy felt a twist of conflicting emotions. She had never actively sought revenge. All she'd wanted was a secure life for Toby. Now she realized she held something else entirely, the power to reshape Toby's future in ways Zachary could never have imagined. With dawn breaking, she signed the forms. Then she stood, stretching her stiff limbs, and peeked in on Toby, fast asleep, small chest rising and falling in gentle rhythm. In a few months or years, he might ask about his father. The day would come when she had to tell him the truth, but until then, she would protect him from the chaos that Harriet predicted. A year later, Harriet had passed on, leaving a lasting legacy, both financial and emotional. Toby, now 4, continued to develop at a rate that astounded teachers and doctors alike. Amy's surgical innovations were saving hundreds of children worldwide, earning her international accolades. She had multiple job offers from prestigious institutions, but remained loyal to Henderson Memorial, where Toby felt most at home. Then came the invitation that changed everything. A star-studded charity event intended to honor groundbreaking medical professionals and philanthropic donors. Amy would be receiving another award for her revolutionary pediatric heart valve design, a technique that drastically improved survival rates for newborns with congenital heart defects. The black tie gala was set at the city's premier hotel, complete with camera crews, live streaming news coverage, and the presence of dozens of top-tier donors. Stepping onto the red carpet, Amy gripped Toby's hand. He looked adorable in a custom black suit, his dark hair slicked back in an effort to appear grown up. Photographers called out for pictures, and Toby blinked at the flashing lights, still a little startled by such public attention. They made their way into the grand ballroom, which shimmered with polished floors, glittering chandeliers, and elegantly decorated tables. Banners proclaiming new expansions in pediatric medicine lined the walls. Amy greeted colleagues and supporters, all eager to congratulate her. She mentally braced herself for the possibility of running into Zachary. He was rumored to be on the guest list, having been involved in philanthropic efforts recently, perhaps in a bid to rebuild his tarnished reputation. Soon enough, the evening's host stepped onto the elevated stage, microphone in hand, to introduce Dr. Amy Lawson. Applause broke out like rolling thunder as the spotlight found her, standing near the front with Toby. Approaching the podium, she glanced across the sea of faces. Sure enough, near the back stood Zachary, his expression unreadable. She took a deep breath and began. When I first stumbled upon the idea of forging a new technique in pediatric surgery, I was driven by necessity, tiny hearts that desperately needed solutions. Through trial and error, we found a way to give these children a fighting chance. Tonight, I want to dedicate this award to the smallest warriors I've ever known, and to my son, Toby, who inspires me every day. Toby stepped up beside her, holding a small box that contained the shimmering crystal statuette. His voice rang through the microphone, high but self-assured. "Congratulations, Mommy!" His grin was contagious, eliciting laughter and cheers from the crowd. Cameras flashed, immortalizing the moment. Across the room, Amy glimpsed Zachary pressing a hand to his forehead, as though the scene was too much to bear. Within moments, he turned on his heel and left through the side door, disappearing into the night. Amy felt an odd mixture of sadness and relief flicker through her. She turned her attention back to Toby, who bounced on his toes with excitement. By the event's end, Toby had charmed nearly every guest, giving a wide-eyed explanation of how the pediatric heart valves worked. He used simple analogies, like little doorways inside the heart, as he called them. Yet his words displayed a clear intelligence that belied his young age. Reporters marveled, and Amy found herself fielding questions about her son's own future in medicine. Later, alone in the quiet hush of the post-gala corridor, Toby clutched a small plush heart given to him by one of the vendors. He and Amy waited for the car service. She felt a presence before turning to see Zachary standing behind them, disheveled and uncertain. In the hallway's subdued light, he looked as if he'd aged a decade. "Amy," he began softly, I'm sorry, I know I have no right to ask anything, but I'd like to meet Toby, even if just for a moment." Amy's mind whirled. Part of her wanted to refuse outright. Another part recognized that Toby would grow older and ask questions. She let out a shaky breath, turning to Toby. "Toby," she said gently, "this is Mr. Warren. He's someone who once knew our family." Toby looked up inquisitively, clutching his plush heart. "Hi," he said, unafraid. Zachary swallowed. "Hi, Toby." His voice trembled with regret. 1,000 apologies were contained in that simple greeting. Amy said nothing more, leaving the moment suspended. After an awkward beat, Zachary added, "I have a letter, for him, for when he's older." He extended an envelope. She took it wordlessly. Toby, sensing the tension, tilted his head. "Mommy, can we go home now?" "Yes, sweetheart," she replied softly, guiding him toward the exit. She cast one last glance at Zachary. "Whatever you have to say, put it in writing. I'll decide when he's ready to read it." Zachary nodded, tears glistening in his tired eyes. Then in silence, he slipped away. Amy and Toby emerged into the nighttime air. Their car waited, engine humming. Toby's eyelids drooped with exhaustion. As she buckled him into his booster seat, he murmured, "Mommy, you fix hearts, right?" She paused, recalling how far they had both come. "Yes, baby, I fix little hearts every day." He let out a contented sigh, nuzzling against the seatbelt. "That's good," he whispered, eyes drifting shut. Amy shut the car door gently. Some hearts, she thought, could never truly be fixed, at least not by surgical skill alone. But she had Toby, and he had her. Together, their future shone brighter than any corporate empire could promise. The chauffeur pulled away from the curb, and Amy couldn't help but smile at her sleeping son. In the hush of the city streets, she silently thanked him for giving her the strength to rewrite her life story, one heartbeat at a time. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey, from Amy's heartbreak to her rise as a trailblazing surgeon and devoted mother. It's a testament to the power of resilience when destiny throws unforeseen challenges your way. Whether it's finding the courage to stand up for yourself, protecting those you love at all costs, or rediscovering broken bonds, these characters show us that hope can outshine even the darkest moments. We hope you've been inspired by their unwavering spirit. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing the link with friends who appreciate a good tale of determination and redemption. And don't forget to let us know in the comments what you think. Did you see that ending coming? Where are you listening from, and which part touched you the most? We look forward to sharing even more compelling narratives with you soon. Hello everyone, and welcome to our channel. In this heartwarming tale, the most jaw-dropping moment comes right at the end, when the billionaire Tristan finally discovers the truth about his daughter and sets off a ripple of surprising revelations. If you're curious about how this life-changing discovery plays out and what it means for the two little girls who look exactly alike, you won't want to miss the full story. We invite you to listen from beginning to end so you can experience every emotional twist and heartfelt turn. While you're here, please remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories and drop your thoughts in the comments section. Let us know where you like to listen, whether it's on the go or in a cozy spot at home. Ruby clutched her threadbare stuffed rabbit as she stood on tiptoe, peering through the tall iron gates that surrounded Enchanted Shore Amusement Park. A wave of bright colors washed over her senses. Balloons in vivid blues and reds, shimmering lights from spinning rides, and cheerful music drifting through the crisp autumn air. Children's Day was in full swing, and 8-year-old Ruby could only imagine the delight of wandering through the park's whimsical attractions alongside beaming parents. Instead, she stood outside with her mother, Linda, who was in line at a nearby snack cart. Though Linda had spent her last few coins on a small bag of popcorn, Ruby could sense her mother's heartbreak. It was never easy for Linda to see other families enjoying luxuries and treats they could not afford. After losing her steady job at a local garment factory, Linda had been working odd hours cleaning offices and washing dishes, scraping by to support them in their cramped, drafty apartment. Despite her mother's sincere attempts to mask her worry with a reassuring smile, Ruby understood they were struggling. Sometimes Linda would promise that better days lay ahead. But at 8 years old, Ruby already sensed how hope can shift like sand through the cracks of hardship. She felt the pang of longing most sharply on days like this, on Children's Day, when every other kid seemed to be enjoying the rides, the laughter, and the sense of joyful celebration. Even so, Ruby usually managed to put on a brave face. She would stand with her nose pressed against the fence, picturing herself on the teacups, the bumper cars, or the grand carousel she had only glimpsed in old brochures. Linda's voice had held that note of determined optimism when she said, "We'll just watch from the outside if we can't get in, sweetheart. Then I'll buy us some popcorn and we'll share it, so at least we'll feel a bit of the fun." Ruby appreciated her mother's effort. She always did. But a part of her yearned to join the families bustling past the gate, skipping into the park as if they belonged there. The faint smell of cotton candy and buttered popcorn made her heart ache. Curiosity overcame her patience as she wandered along the fence, letting her small feet carry her slightly away from where Linda had asked her to wait. She didn't stray too far. She would never intentionally cause her mother worry, but her eyes flickered with excitement at the swirl of lights and movement. That was when Ruby noticed them, a man and a girl about her age, standing in a VIP line. The man wore an impeccably tailored suit, posture confident, even regal, his polished shoes catching the sunlight. The girl, however, was what made Ruby's breath stop. She was wearing a pale yellow dress, hair curling around her shoulders in soft coils. Her wide hazel eyes shone with delight, and they were the exact same shape and color as Ruby's. A sudden, uncanny realization made Ruby's heart pound. The girl's face mirrored hers so closely that it was like gazing into a living reflection, but one that stood within a life Ruby had never known. Standing there, Ruby felt an odd prickling sensation at the nape of her neck. This other girl, who looked so like her, wore pristine clothes and held the man's hand as though she were certain of her place in the world. Ruby glanced down at her own faded shirt, stitched and restitched, along with the scuffed shoes she'd found at a church rummage sale. Even her mother's best attempts at patching them couldn't conceal their worn condition. She clung to her stuffed rabbit, which had been given to her by a sympathetic neighbor years ago, and felt the plush toy's familiar comfort steady her. Unable to stop herself, she inched closer. The man was on the phone, his voice low and authoritative, mentioning something about contracts and final deals, his words too important for Ruby to fully understand. She paused near the fence, her eyes never leaving the little girl in the neat yellow dress. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The same small nose, a tiny beauty mark just above the right eyebrow, and even a missing front tooth in the exact same spot. Ruby raised a hand to touch the gap in her own grin, half in disbelief. Before she could talk herself out of it, Ruby found a gap in the crowd and slipped inside, weaving past families who hurried toward the ticket booths. She approached the man and the little girl directly. The man finished with his call, lowered his phone, but looked like he was mentally preparing for another. The girl, whose name Ruby later learned was Bella, tugged on his sleeve to point at the enormous roller coaster overhead, but froze the moment her eyes landed on Ruby. Their gazes locked, two pairs of identical hazel eyes, and Bella's mouth dropped open in surprise. Ruby, breath tight in her chest, drew a small, shaky breath. She thought about how Linda always reminded her to be polite to strangers, but the question tumbled out anyway, its urgency beating in her chest like a drum. "Sir," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "why does your daughter look exactly like me?" The man's expression shifted in an instant, from mild distraction to stunned disbelief. His phone, which was still in his hand, slipped from his grip and hit the paved walkway with a sharp clatter, drawing the attention of some people nearby. Bella turned to her father. "Dad," she whispered, her own confusion evident, "she looks exactly like me." The man, Tristan Blackwood, renowned billionaire and CEO of the global corporation Blackwood Innovations, found himself suddenly speechless, a condition he rarely experienced in his world of high-stakes negotiations. He knelt to Ruby's height, carefully taking in her face, her ragged clothes, and the stuffed rabbit clutched to her side. Ruby tried not to fidget under his intense blue-eyed scrutiny. "Where is your mother?" he asked at last, his voice strangely hoarse. "What's her name?" Ruby recognized the tone of a command, but she answered anyway, still reeling from seeing Bella's face. "Her name is Linda Hale. She's right over there. At least she was." Ruby's voice fell to a whisper as confusion swirled in her mind. She pointed to the general area where Linda had been, but the crowd had shifted. The man's expression changed again when he heard her mother's name. Whether it was recognition or disbelief, Ruby couldn't tell. Just then, a panicked voice sliced through the swirling noise of the amusement park. "Ruby! Ruby, where are you?" Linda Hale, breathless and worried, burst through the clusters of families gathering around the rides. Her heart felt as though it might pound out of her chest. The moment she saw Ruby standing next to Tristan Blackwood, Linda froze. She recognized him instantly. How could she not? Memories, questions, and half-formed regrets surged to the surface of her mind, creating a tumult of emotion. She faltered, nearly dropping the half-full popcorn bag in her hands. The popcorn scattered on the ground, ignored in the face of her shock. "Tristan?" she managed to say, her voice catching on his name. It sounded foreign on her tongue after so many years. Tristan slowly stood up, eyes locked on Linda, in a way that made the world around them fade into the background. A hush seemed to fall, even amidst the bustling atmosphere. Bella gazed from Tristan to Linda, then to Ruby, her young mind trying to piece together the puzzle. Linda tried to compose herself. She bent to tug Ruby protectively close, as if shielding her from a past that was suddenly all too present. "Mom!" Ruby piped up, her voice pitched with confusion and excitement. "She looks just like me," she pointed at Bella, and Linda couldn't deny the uncanny likeness. It was something no parent could simply ignore. The same open, curious face, the same birthmark, and the same gap-toothed grin. Tristan's throat tightened as he recognized Linda's familiar features. The gentle curve of her cheekbones, the determined light in her eyes. Things he had once cherished, but those were overshadowed by the pain of years gone by. He remembered how she had disappeared without explanation, leaving him a single note that offered no real closure. "Linda," he said softly, his composure on the verge of cracking, "I've been trying to find you for—" "We have nothing to talk about," Linda interrupted firmly, her grip on Ruby's hand shaking slightly. "Come on, Ruby, let's go." Linda's resolve wavered under the intense swirl of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her, but her protective instinct kicked in. She tried to steer her daughter away from the man she had once known, the man whose life, as far as she believed, had diverged from hers in the most dramatic way possible. That was the day she learned he'd become engaged to a wealthy socialite, only 2 weeks after Linda herself had told him she might be pregnant. The heartbreak had been profound enough to make Linda vanish from his orbit entirely, or so she'd thought. Bella intervened, taking a step closer. "Dad, can Ruby and her mom come inside with us? Please?" she asked. "It's Children's Day, and I'd really like to ride with her. It's so weird and amazing that we look alike." Her voice held that sweet, earnest quality unique to children, unaffected by the weight of the adult tension around her. Tristan studied his daughter's eager face, then cast a hesitant glance toward Linda, whose posture remained defensive. "Bella, honey," Tristan began, "I'm not sure that's up to me alone. We need—" "Please, Mom," Ruby pleaded, turning to Linda. There was wonder in her eyes, along with a flicker of something else. Longing, curiosity, maybe the faint hope that she had found some piece of her life that had been missing all along. Linda's shoulders sagged as she witnessed the earnest expressions on both girls' faces. It felt like the entire amusement park had gone quiet, though in reality crowds still bustled around them, and laughter from a distant roller coaster soared over the hum of chatter. Linda tried to steady her voice, every muscle in her body tight. "Just for today," she finally relented, her mouth a thin line. "For the children's sake." The relief that passed over Ruby's face brought a pang to Linda's heart. Ruby rarely asked for much, knowing how precarious their finances were. But when she did, Linda always tried to offer whatever small joys she could. She told herself that this was all for Ruby, yet the knot of anxiety coiled in Linda's stomach warned her that reopening her past might not be wise. Tristan, for his part, remained unusually silent, but gestured politely for Linda and Ruby to follow him and Bella toward the main entrance. Within seconds, he bypassed the lines with a quick nod to the staff, who bowed slightly in recognition of the billionaire. The stark contrast between his world of immediate VIP access and Linda's constant battle with low-paying jobs tugged at her pride. She inhaled deeply, determined not to let that disparity rattle her in front of her daughter. The moment they passed into the park, the girls' faces lit up. Bella squealed as she pointed to a spinning contraption that looked like giant teacups swirling in pastel colors. Ruby's eyes widened at the sight of the park's iconic carousel, its carved horses shimmering under a canopy of lights. Linda caught Tristan watching Ruby with a mixture of awe and regret. "Linda," he said softly, walking a step behind the excited girls to allow them some freedom, "we need to talk. About everything. Soon." Linda's heart pounded painfully. Images from 8 years ago flashed through her mind. Tristan, just a bright, ambitious young man back then, standing in front of a glossy magazine cover announcing his so-called arranged engagement, turning everything in her world upside down. She'd never given him the chance to explain, never believed there was any explanation that could justify the betrayal she had felt. Those memories clashed with the present moment, seeing his gentle side as he tried to bond with both Ruby and Bella. "Not here," Linda said at last. "It's too public. Not in front of the girls." Then she added as the call of motherhood rose in her, "Ruby, stay where I can see you." Her voice wavered slightly, but Ruby turned to give her a reassuring grin, hugging her stuffed rabbit close. For now, Linda kept her focus on the children and the day that was meant for them. The hush of unspoken secrets hovered between her and Tristan, like a storm cloud waiting to break. Bella led Ruby to the carousel first, both girls clambering onto adjacent painted horses that bobbed to the rhythm of cheerful organ music. The swirl of lights and colors created a magical tapestry that momentarily drew everyone in. Linda stood near the railing, tension still thrumming through her as she watched Ruby's delighted smile. Tristan stood beside her, hands in his pockets, gaze flickering between the girls and Linda's tense profile. When the ride began to slow, Tristan finally spoke in a voice that barely rose above the carousel's mechanical hum. "I never forgot you," he said simply, "or the night you vanished. I hired investigators. Did you know that? They never could find a trace of you." Linda's jaw tightened. It pained her to imagine a younger, less sure Tristan searching for her. But she couldn't forget the bitter heartbreak that had driven her away. "I saw the announcement in the paper," she murmured, not looking at him directly. "You were engaged to some elite socialite just 2 weeks after I told you I might be pregnant. How could I face you after that?" Tristan exhaled and shook his head. "That announcement was manufactured by my father and the board. I never agreed to it. I was young, but I wasn't so weak that I'd marry someone for the sake of business. I broke it off as soon as I found out they'd set it in motion. But the damage had been done. You were gone." His voice sounded strained with the weight of that memory, and Linda felt a flicker of doubt, the possibility that she had made the wrong assumption all those years ago. She swallowed hard, but the words refused to come. Just then, the girls hopped off their carousel horses and hurried back to Linda and Tristan. Bella tugged on Tristan's hand, excitement overflowing. "Can we do the bumper cars next, Dad?" Ruby wants to try them too. Ruby nodded, a cautious hope shining in her eyes. Linda offered a tentative smile. Sure, she agreed, reminding herself that no matter how complicated things were between her and Tristan, this day was for the girls. They could hammer out their turbulent past later. The group moved on to the bumper cars, weaving through laughter-filled lines. Bella's eyes sparkled with anticipation, and Ruby's grin matched it. Linda found herself blinking back tears, realizing just how rare it was for Ruby to be this carefree. Over the past few years, Linda had felt guilty every time she had to say no to amusements or trips because of limited funds. Seeing Ruby in such a joyful moment tugged at her heart. Maybe it was worth enduring Tristan's presence, if only to give her daughter a single day free from worry. Tristan noticed Linda's expression. Gently, he placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. She stiffened, but didn't pull away immediately. "Let's enjoy today," he said, echoing her unspoken sentiment. For now, they turned their attention to Bella and Ruby, who were climbing into bumper cars with identical looks of glee. A heavy conversation still loomed, but it could wait for the sake of two little girls who deserved, at least this once, to laugh without sorrow. Late afternoon sunlight was beginning to slant across the park when Tristan's personal assistant arrived, searching the crowd until he spotted the billionaire and his unexpected company. The assistant approached quietly, his respectful bow hinting at a frantic message. "Mr. Blackwood, there's a situation with the Hong Kong branch on the phone. Something about urgent contract negotiations that can't wait." Tristan glanced at his phone, which he had muted for the duration of the afternoon. "All right," he relented. "I'll take it. Make sure Bella's safe and—" He hesitated, eyes scanning Linda and Ruby. "Could you escort them to a quieter area? Perhaps the VIP lounge?" The assistant nodded, but Linda immediately shook her head, tense lines etching her face again. "We don't need a babysitter," she said, summoning her pride. But Tristan managed to offer a small, comforting smile that quelled some of her suspicion. "It's not permanent, Linda. Let me handle this call, and I promise I'll be right back. Then we can talk. Really talk." The words "really talk" lingered in the air like a promise. Despite her internal turmoil, Linda conceded. She gathered Ruby close as the assistant guided them toward a private corner of the park, shaded by tall, flowering trees. Bella, walking alongside them, chattered cheerfully, oblivious to the gravity pressing on the adults. "Ruby, isn't this so cool? I've never met anyone who looked like me before." Ruby nodded, hugging her stuffed rabbit tightly. "Yeah," she said, still awestruck. "It's kind of like I just found a twin I never knew I had." Even though Linda's heart pounded with unresolved tension, she couldn't help noticing how easily Bella and Ruby connected. They giggled over Bella's fancy hair ribbons and Ruby's scuffed bunny, forging a bond that felt as though it had been waiting to happen for a lifetime. Watching them, Linda's eyes stung with tears. She wondered if things might have been different had she stayed in Tristan's life long ago. Would the girls have grown up side by side, sisters from infancy, inseparable? After about 15 minutes, Tristan reappeared, his phone tucked away, his brow knit with lingering stress from corporate troubles. He inhaled, running a hand through his hair as if trying to physically brush off the day's tension. Then his gaze settled on Linda, earnest, pointed, and weighed with unspoken questions. "There's a small cafe area near the park entrance," he said softly, stepping close enough that Bella and Ruby couldn't overhear. "Let me arrange a quiet corner for us. We can figure out how to tell them the truth, together." Linda swallowed. "They deserve to know," she acknowledged, her voice tinged with sadness. "And so do you, I guess, about Ruby." Before Tristan could respond, Bella hopped forward, her gaze flicking between Tristan and Linda. "Dad, can we get ice cream? It's hot." Ruby chimed in, her eyes lighting up. Linda and Tristan exchanged a look. "Yes," they agreed in unison, mustering small smiles at how their responses had aligned perfectly. The newly formed quartet headed to the cafe, hearts pounding with both dread and anticipation of the conversation that would soon unfold. They settled at a shaded table, ice cream cones in hand, and for a few magical moments, it almost seemed like an ordinary family outing. Bella and Ruby happily discussed what flavors they liked best: chocolate mint for Bella, strawberry swirl for Ruby, and Linda found herself grateful for the brief respite from tension. Yet as soon as the sweetness of melting ice cream began to wear off, Bella, inquisitive by nature, tilted her head. "Dad?" she began, glancing from Tristan to Linda. "Are you and Mrs. Hale old friends or something? Because Ruby and I look so much alike. That doesn't usually happen, does it?" Ruby looked up at her mother, a crease forming on her small brow. "Mom, I've asked about my dad before. You said, well, that he didn't know about me, but you never told me who he was." The question hung in the air like a spark near a powder keg. Linda and Tristan exchanged a quick, uncertain glance, aware that they stood on the precipice of life-altering revelations for both girls. Linda exhaled shakily, her gaze dropping to the table. "It's time," she said quietly to Tristan, giving him a small nod. Tristan cleared his throat, leaning forward. "Bella, Ruby, this is complicated, but we're going to explain as best we can. A while ago, your mom and I were—" He paused, searching for a gentle way to phrase it. "Very close. We cared about each other a great deal. We were together." Linda intervened when she saw the puzzlement deepen in Ruby's eyes. "I found out I was pregnant, but then I read an announcement about Tristan's engagement to someone else. I thought he didn't want us, so I disappeared. I never told him." Ruby's face paled, and Bella stared wide-eyed at her father. "But that means—" Bella began, her voice quavering. "That means you're sisters," Tristan confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "Ruby is my daughter, just like you are, Bella." The weight of the confession pressed down on them all. Ruby felt tears prick her eyes, an onrush of wonder and confusion tangling up inside her. "So, are you my dad?" she asked Tristan, voice trembling. He reached across the table, laying a tentative hand over hers. "Yes, Ruby," he said gently. "I'm your dad, and I didn't know you existed until today." Silence settled like a dense cloud. Linda curled her hand around her daughter's, prepared to comfort her if she bolted. But Ruby didn't pull away. She stared at Tristan with a blend of curiosity, hurt, and cautious hope. "Why didn't you try to find us?" she asked, though her eyes flicked to Linda as if she suspected part of the answer. Tristan's shoulders slumped. "I did look for Linda, your mom, many times. She was so good at hiding that I couldn't find her." A sad smile touched his lips as he glanced at Linda. "She's always been resourceful." For a moment, the two girls simply looked at each other, digesting this new reality. Half-sisters, parted by the secrets and misunderstandings of adults, and now colliding on this festival day like it was fate. Bella's tear-filled eyes met Ruby's, and both recognized something strangely wonderful, a bond that had existed, unseen, since they were born. Tearful and unsettled though they were, the girls latched on to one another, their identical eyes reflecting an uncertain joy. Linda squeezed Ruby's hand in reassurance. "I know it's a shock," she said softly, "and you have every right to feel upset or confused. But please understand, I did what I thought was best at the time." Tristan, unable to restrain his paternal instincts any longer, pulled out a handkerchief and gently dabbed Ruby's cheeks. "We can't change the past," he said, "but we can figure out the future, together." Yet as soon as those words left his mouth, an elegant, poised figure approached their table, heels clicking on the paved walkway. Linda recognized her at once. Harriet Wynne, the CFO of Blackwood Innovations and a longtime associate of Tristan's family. Harriet's eyes flicked over the group, taking in the unspoken tension. She offered a cordial nod that lacked warmth. "Tristan," she greeted, "I came to deliver documents for your signature. Our Tokyo expansion meeting was rescheduled for tomorrow." "Is this a bad time?" Tristan set his jaw, feeling Linda tense up beside him. Linda also recalled Harriet's name from old newspaper articles that had featured Tristan's business circle. Harriet had always been rumored to have romantic ties to Tristan's world, but from the look of it now, Harriet's primary concern was strictly corporate. "I'll sign them," Tristan said curtly, "but not here. Wait for me by the park's main office." Harriet cast a final lingering glance at the two girls who could have been twins, then nodded. "Very well." She pivoted away, her footsteps echoing with a certain finality. Once Harriet was out of earshot, Bella piped up. "I don't like Harriet much," she admitted. "She's always talking about stuff I don't understand, and she never has time to play with me like Aunt Charlotte does." A weak smile ghosted across Linda's features, surprised at how Bella spoke with such open honesty. Ruby, for her part, looked anxious. "Who was that?" "A business associate," Tristan said simply, though he spotted Linda's quick glance, as if to confirm Harriet wasn't more than that. "Nothing to worry about." Then he cleared his throat. "How about we wrap up here and head over to my office lounge? It's close by, and there's a private play area where you two can hang out while your mom and I talk." The last word hung in the air, loaded with the magnitude of what they needed to discuss. Bella and Ruby exchanged glances, still digesting the reality that they were sisters. Linda squared her shoulders, forcing composure. "I have a shift in the early evening cleaning offices," she said, the weariness in her tone more pronounced than before. "I can't be late. I really need the money." Tristan nodded, slipping into a calm resolve. "I'll take care of it," he said quietly. "I don't want your charity," Linda responded sharply, though an undercurrent of relief coursed through her. She was exhausted emotionally and physically, and the idea of forging a plan for her daughter's future with Tristan loomed large. "It's not charity," Tristan assured her. "I just want us to have time to figure out how to handle this situation. Our daughters, our past." He looked at her, sorrow and determination flickering in his gaze. Linda sighed, nodding more in surrender than agreement. The truth was that no matter what had happened between them, Tristan was Ruby's father. And for the sake of their child, Linda had to let him in, at least long enough to decide what came next. The sun was dipping lower on the horizon by the time they arrived at Blackwood Innovations, housed in a sleek glass front tower that loomed over the city's financial district. Upon exiting the car, Ruby stared wide-eyed at the polished marble lobby, the crisp lines of modern architecture, and the imposing letters spelling out Blackwood above the reception desk. Bella offered a proud little grin, lightly tugging Ruby's hand and whispering, "See that elevator? It goes straight to Dad's private office, like something out of a movie." Linda's stomach twisted with memories. Years before, she had visited Tristan in an older building when he was just beginning his climb to prominence. Now he commanded an empire, with staff bowing politely at his appearance. Still, she reminded herself that the conversation they needed to have involved far more than corporate success. They took the executive elevator up to a plush lounge, walls adorned with abstract art and floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing a breathtaking view of the skyline. A kindly older receptionist greeted them warmly, though her quick, astonished glance at the two identical girls did not escape notice. "Mrs. Chen," Tristan said, addressing the woman with genuine fondness, "this is Linda Hale and her daughter Ruby. Please show them around while I handle a few urgent calls. Bella, take Ruby to the play area. It's through that door." His voice gentled. "You two can check out our treehouse room. There's even a little slide inside." Bella's face lit up, and Ruby looked at her mother for approval. Linda nodded, mouth set in a thin line, but heart softening at the sight of her daughter's excitement. Both girls scampered off with Mrs. Chen, leaving Linda and Tristan alone in the hush of the executive suite. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Tristan broke the silence first. "Come into my office," he said quietly, gesturing to a spacious corner room enclosed by glass walls. Linda followed, noticing the city lights beginning to flicker on outside, highlighting the distance between this rarefied world and her own struggles. Once inside, the door closed softly, and Tristan let out a long exhale. "So, now we finally talk." "Yes." Linda rubbed her arms, trying to ward off a sudden chill. She gazed at his desk, neat but for a single frame photo of Bella, smiling with a carefree innocence Linda envied. "I know I owe you an explanation," she began. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was scared. The day I tried to tell you, I found that engagement announcement in the business journal. It confirmed every fear I had, that our worlds were too different, that your father, maybe even you, would never truly accept me. I felt so out of place, so I ran." Tristan studied her with clear-eyed regret. "I tried to fight my father's demands. When you disappeared, I ended that fake engagement. I walked away from him, from the company for a while, started building my own future. But you were nowhere to be found." His voice caught. "Linda, you left me without even a chance to explain. And you didn't tell me about Ruby. Do you have any idea how many milestones I missed?" Linda's eyes brimmed with tears she fought to control. I convinced myself you didn't want me. Us. I never imagined you'd defy your father like that. She swallowed, shame burning her throat. I was wrong. The final admission was quiet, but even in that solitude, it felt monumental. Outside, the nighttime glow of the city formed a glittering canopy, reflecting how large the world was and how small they felt, locked in this moment of truth. The next morning, Linda woke to find Ruby already dressed, anxiously waiting by the door. Bella, too, had arrived with Tristan, her face beaming at the prospect of a shared day together. With a slightly nervous smile, Tristan invited Linda to accompany them on a house hunting trip, a bold step toward uniting their newly blended family. Driving through quiet neighborhoods, they visited several homes that offered both the stability Ruby had longed for and the comfort Bella enjoyed. At a modest yet welcoming house with a sunny backyard, both girls let out squeals of excitement, running hand in hand to explore each room. Linda, overwhelmed, glanced at Tristan. In his gaze, she saw the promise of new beginnings. Later that evening, as they all stood in the empty living room, a sense of peace settled over them. For the first time, they felt truly complete.